Hi, welcome to Lama's Kitchen. And we're all familiar with linguine and clam sauce, but today we're going to do a spicy linguine and clam sauce that also incorporates bacon bits inside, so it's a totally fresh take. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take half a pound of bacon. Make sure you get quality bacon, because when you don't get quality bacon, you won't see as much actual meat versus fat. So this is a good one because you can see it has a lot of actual meat. What you're going to do is you're going to take your bacon, and since you don't separate the pieces, you just kind of leave it as a whole, just to make life a lot easier. So you take your knife and you cut about 1/2-inch strips going all the way across. You're going to take it apart just very loosely, even though it's going to separate inside of the pan. Okay, so now we're going to take our bacon and we're going to put it inside our frying pan. You want to keep it on medium heat and just spread out for a bit, and you want it to be like a crispy brown. You know, you don't want sogginess in this because there's going to be a sauce that accompanies that, and it'll just turn into like a pork kind of a mess. So while we're letting that cook, we're going to take 3 lemons. Okay, with the lemons, just cut in half. So you're going to need 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Depending upon how juicy your lemons are, you may need 1, you may need 2, or you may need 3. But okay, so now you have your 1/4 cup of lemon juice, and you just put that to the side. Now what we're doing right now with the lemon juice is basically making the spicy sauce component. All right, so the next thing you want to do is you want to have 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. And because I'm Puerto Rican, you have to use a mortar, and that's the way it goes. If you have a garlic press, that's great. If you want to do it by hand, you can, but I just prefer it this way. So you take your garlic cloves, and they usually have the skin on. So to make life easy, you don't need to buy a gadget. You just put the knife on top, bang it out, and then the skins just come off, okay? Now, depending upon the size of your garlic, you know, you can't really say 3 cloves, 4 cloves, whatever, because you don't know how much it's going to yield once it's minced. Now, while this is going on, you don't have to babysit the bacon. You know, bacon is really tough. It can pretty much survive a nuclear war. So you can just give it a stir every once in a while. All right, so if you're not familiar with this, so pretty much what you do is you put in your garlic, and in order to get traction so that it doesn't fly out, you put in some salt and some pepper. So this is a gizmo that has salt and pepper inside, so you just turn one direction or another to get it out, which makes life a lot easier. Don't really concern yourself with measuring it because you're going to have to season your food later on regardless. As I said, this is just for traction. And you just kind of pound away. So once that's done, you just spoon it out onto your cutting board. And then you just take your knife and go through it loosely a couple of times. Don't overload the spoon and get too excited. You know, you want it fairly level because this is a very spicy, garlicky dish. So pretty much, and that's fairly level. And you put that with your lemon juice. And you just kind of give that a swirl. The next step is you're going to have 2 teaspoons of chili pepper flakes. Now, don't consider yourself it's going to be too spicy or not, because later on, you can dictate how much you want to put in. So for right now, just pour inside. And you just stir that up, okay? So while your bacon is crisping, you just want to let this sit on the side for a little bit. Now, once your bacon is done, you want to get a small saucepan with a lid. It has to have a lid. And you take your mixture and you put it inside. Then you take your pot and you put it on your stove once the bacon is done cooking, and you put this on a very, very low flame because you just want the flavors to marry, okay? You don't want to have the lemon juice entirely evaporate on you, okay? Okay, so at this point, after about 10 to 12 minutes, because you don't want to put the bacon on a really high heat, because then it just, some parts become really burnt, and then like the fatty part has a tendency to just stay kind of mushy and have an undercooked look. So a lower heat is always better. In the meantime, when you're doing this, you want to put your pasta water on for a boil, and then over here we have the lemon, the garlic, and the peppers just on a very, very low heat with a lid on top so those flavors can marinate. Okay, so the next step we have is you're going to take out the bacon from the pan and you're going to put it on a paper towel so it can absorb some of the fat. Okay, so you're just gonna let this hang out by itself and don't worry about it. If you're really concerned about absorbing the extra fat, you can just fold the paper towel over and then flip it so that both sides completely get absorbed. All right, so now we have our clams, which are sitting here in this bowl with cool water. Now, the thing about clams, and these are little neck clams, is that when you initially get them, usually they're very dirty because clams live in muck, basically, and in sand. So you take a brush and you scrub the outsides. These, when I purchased them, already came clean. So you put them in a bowl of cool water for about half an hour to an hour, and what happens is they automatically open up on their own and they will spit out any dirt that's inside, so you don't have to worry about the grittiness entering into your linguine when you're done. So you take out your clams, and sometimes they are still open. So what you do is you just kind of like, you tap them and they'll just automatically shut because you want them shut. Now sometimes your clams may end up making a lot of noise and they really open and it can get slightly scary, but don't worry about that at all. Okay. So once your clams are clean, okay, the next thing you're going to want to do is you want to steam them. And in order to steam them, you want to have a vessel or a pot that is big enough where everybody can just kind of lay out completely flat. So instead of just using a traditional pot, which may not have enough room because not every clam will have the opportunity to fully open, I'm going to use a pan that would be traditionally used for roasting because it has more than enough space. Okay, so in this pan, I'm going to put half a cup of water and half a cup of dry white wine. Okay, that's it. All right, so what's going to happen over here at the stove is you have your pan that still has the bacon fat inside, all right? Don't wash it, don't do anything with it, just totally put it to the side, okay? And you're going to take your oven pot and you're going to share it on 2 burners. And you're going to put it on medium heat. All right, now, as you can see, maybe you can or cannot, but there's some steam rising, okay? And you want a little bit of a boil effect. All right, usually takes about a minute or two. Now you're going to take your clams, once that gets going, and you're going to put them in one single layer. Now you have to cover them up because you really want the flavor. You really want to cover them up because you want to trap the flavor, okay? You don't want everything to just boil off into nothingness. So you put the lid on and you set your timer anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes. Mine is on my stove. So I'm going to do for 10 minutes. The reason why I decide to do 10 minutes is because it's kind of like a safety valve, because any clam that's not opened after 10 minutes you have to throw away, and it's not good. So for this duration, you pretty much just have your water boiling, okay? You don't want to put the linguini into the pot of boiling water until the clams are in, because they should be done around the same time. Now when you put your linguini in, because it's obviously a very long noodle and may hang out on the outside of the pot, but it'll eventually soften and then fold through. The thing about pasta is that some people may know or some people may not, is that you really have to stir it so that it doesn't stick together, because then that just ends up being like a mob of glutinous stuff and it's not really a good look. The other thing too is that when you season your pasta water, because this dish has seafood in it, okay, and because the seafood comes from a salted ocean, there's already going to be a sodium content that comes from the clams themselves. So you kind of want to have a light hand when it comes to salting the linguini. So for a package of linguini, I like to put 1 tablespoon. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you salt at the beginning or at the end, because it'll just dissolve and it'll have the flavor content. So we're almost down to the home stretch. So at this point you want to strain your linguini. And you're just going to put that to the side. So we're going to go back to our frying pan that already has the bacon fat in there, okay? We want some of it, but we don't want all of it. So we're going to take some of the bacon fat out of the pan because the flavoring of bacon can be very overwhelming. It won't be enough bacon fat to necessarily spoon out of the pan, so taking a paper towel is usually enough. You don't want to entirely wipe it clean, but just kind of get rid of any pools that are inside. All right, now that that's done, let's check on our clams. And as you can see, they're all open. So the next step is you take your linguini and you put it back into the pan with the bacon fat. Take your tongs and give it a nice swirl so that the flavor is evenly distributed. Okay, now you're going to take your olive oil and you're going to need 6 tablespoons of olive oil. This also prevents the sticking. Continue to toss. That's good. So now you're going to take your already warmed garlic, lemon, and red pepper flake sauce, and you're going to add about half of it in the beginning, just to make sure that it gets incorporated, because it can get quite lumpy. Okay. So at this point, you're going to add the bacon back into the pasta. Now let's talk about these clams. Okay, so because these clams were in a single layer and they weren't very large, again, these are little neck clams, they opened up into the desirable shape, okay? Now the brine that sits at the bottom, you have to save because that's the super juicy, flavorful bit. Okay, so you're gonna take the clams out. And this time we're very fortunate because usually not all of the clams open up, okay? So in this case, every single one did, so we got a very, very fresh batch. Now the remainder of the reduced wine, the water, and the brine from the clams are going to go into the sauce. Now, we're going to get this into our serving bowl. Take your time because this can be a disaster. Okay, at this point you want to taste just a touch, and if you feel you need more sodium, you want to salt and pepper only at the end because, as I said, the shellfish itself already has a lot of sodium in it. And the bacon also has a lot of sodium, so always taste first. All right, so now your pasta is completed. Now with the clams, you can either take them out of their shell or you can leave them in. Obviously, it's much more attractive if you leave them in your shell, but it does create a little bit of a nuisance for people who are eating them, but for the sake of aesthetics, we're gonna add them. So you just gently entwine them in a loose layer at the top. Yeah, so for presentation, you put the linguini all the way around and kind of take some of the pasta noodles and put them over. Now, for the actual clams themselves, you just pretty much open them up. At this point, they should have cooled a bit, all right? Some people use forks. I like to use my fingers. It's way more effective. And I just go in and I pull them out and I drop them in. And you'll be able to see inside that there'll be one part that kind of looks like a silo. That's the muscle for the clam, so that they can shut, and you pretty much don't want to eat that. And the reason why I'm putting them on the top as opposed to mixing them in is that once you mix them in, they'll automatically sink towards the bottom, and then you have to fish them out when you serve people. And if you put them at the top, it's much easier. You also may want to consider how many people that you're serving. So let's say each person gets a plate. You may want to put 2 of these, so you may want to preserve more than I have. And remember, each time that you take out the clam itself, you want to make sure that all the liquid that's sitting inside goes right into your pasta. And I'll just save these last 2 to put in the middle. Now, right before serving, voila, kitchen table. You take your parsley. You can either use a knife to do a fine chop. I prefer to have something that has more of a rustic look, so you can use your cooking shears and you can just cut off and here you go, voila, linguini with spicy bacon and clam sauce.